Hey everyone, welcome so much to the future of remote sales work. We have a wicked panel of conversations here. This is going to be a blast. You can see Caitlyn, Alyshahn, Luiz, and myself. We're going to have a fun conversation about the future of sales work. We have a couple of pieces of information we want to hit before we get started, but let's dig in. First, house rules. This is for the panelists. Points for sharing opposing views. We don't want to have a conversation where we all just agree. Watch the chat and the Q&A. So for the audience, if you have questions for all the panelists, specific panelists, or you want to take the conversation in a new direction, toss it into the chat, toss it into the Q&A. I'll be watching for that closely. As well, I'd invite everyone to be sure to share the live stream URL. That'll show up in the chat on Twitter, LinkedIn, with your networks, because folks who aren't here in the Zoom room can join us live or catch it after the event. And then finally, this is more a house rule for me. We're going to finish on time. This is a 60-minute conversation. I promise to wrap up and get everybody out so that you can all enjoy the rest of your evening. But with that said, let's actually dig in. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We're going to get these videos up and we are going to get our panelists to introduce themselves. So let's give me a moment right here and get rid of this and bring our panelists right up. There we go. Thank you everyone for joining us. This is going to be such a fun conversation. I'd love to start off if I can get each of our panelists to introduce themselves, your name, your title, the company you work for, and instead of the plain old, here's what we do, would love you to introduce yourselves and share what's the weirdest fashion that you've ever rocked. And I'll start that off. Joseph Hung, co-founder, CEO at Uvaro. And yeah, back in the 90s, I had one of those terrible undercuts, you know, where we got the hair all hanging over and it's buzzed right up on high. And I owned that like no one's business. So using the same order that we had on the slides, Caitlyn, Alyshahn, Luiz, can you introduce yourselves in that order and then we'll dig in?
Awesome. Thanks, Joseph. And thank you so much for inviting us to be here today. So my name is Caitlyn. I'm the founder and CEO of HireUp, which is a new recruitment tool that helps streamline the hiring process. So I'd say the strangest trend I've been a part of had to be way back when the Spice Girls were popular. I'm embarrassed to admit that I had a pair of the white platform shoes. So I don't know where they are now. I kind of wish I still had them, but that is unfortunately a semi-traumatizing childhood memory.
I don't know if that's unfortunate. That's a pretty badass one. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, no problem.
Alyshahn.
My name is Alyshahn Kara. I am Chief Revenue Officer at GooseChase. We are a mobile application for scavenger hunts used for everything from festivals to onboarding new employees to education in the classroom, you name it. And craziest fashion trend, I don't know if it's like did rock but I tend to change up my hair quite a bit. So I had a man bun, shoulder length hair. I had blonde platinum hair. You can still see some of the remnants of the platinum in my hair still. So yeah, just like to keep it fresh and keep people guessing, I guess.
I love this. None of that distant throwbacks. You were rocking that recently. Nice. Luiz.
It's amazing. Hey everyone, stoked to be here. Thanks Joseph, Christina for putting this together. So I am the head of sales at Mailshake. We are a sales engagement platform. And the craziest fashion trend, when I lived in Bali, I wore a sarong instead of wearing shorts or pants, and it was totally okay there. And I tried to bring that back to Austin, and it lasted for about a week before it just did not work. So a sarong is like a long skirt, but it's fine in Bali, not okay in Texas.
But what about in Miami? Would it work there?
I haven't tried it yet. I'm really considering now that you made me think about this.
So there's the challenge. That's going to be the future of remote sales. The sarong in Miami. There we go. Nice. Okay, let's dig in. I promised we'd keep it to 60 minutes. And for those in the audience, we have a ton of questions lined up. I really do invite your questions from the chat, but don't worry, we're going to keep this moving. And I know we don't have the time to get through everything. So let's really dig in. Our panel has such a great diversity of experience. I've got a specific question for each of you just to help frame up some reference. So Caitlyn, first for you. You've got this wonderful interviewing, hiring platform, and you're using video for it. What was the real event, the trigger that made you realize you needed to solve this problem?
Yeah, so there were There are a lot of reasons why I started working on HireUp, but I think the main moment where I decided that this was something I was going to go ahead and build was I was actually at an event at Mars, and I was watching this promotional video, and then suddenly in the video I saw somebody that I knew. And around that time, I hated my job. I wanted to work elsewhere. I was so unhappy, and I just sat in the audience thinking, gosh, I wish that she could see me sitting here. Like, I wish that she knew I was looking for work. Like, what if I could just pitch her on hiring me? And so that's when I kind of decided, how come that doesn't exist? Why isn't there a place where video resumes live? And so from that point on, I started working at some of these tech companies to learn more. So I worked at Zello, which used to be Career Cruising, worked at TopPad, I've worked at Wattpad. And what's interesting is that after going through as many interviews as I've gone through across all of the different companies and just companies throughout my career, one of the things that often happens is you encounter someone and they're kind of just there to make sure you're an okay hire. Do you know what I mean? Like, you have a couple people who sit in on interviews that are just to, give a thumbs up. And I started just pitching people. Like, they didn't know, oh, they didn't really have a chance to see my resume. Maybe they did, but they're busy. And I said, do you want me to just talk and tell you about myself? And they were like, fantastic. Right. So it saved them the trouble of trying to ask questions that that maybe have already been asked. And it was just kind of a big time saver for me. So I just figured looking for a job is really tedious. There has to be a better way for us to be able to interview on our own time and also on our own terms.
Love it. And especially as we think about those remote sales careers, that experience is so relevant. So this is awesome. Alyshahn, on the flip side, not so much video specific, but experience. Your team has been remote for a decade. In the sale, so with that in mind, your team's remote. In that landscape of selling, what have you seen change over the last few years? What's really kind of jumped out to you as a difference in how sales has changed?
I feel like the oldest person in the world when I say this, and often get laughed at by some of my colleagues, but I would say that I started my career at Canon and was working on GooseChase at the same time. So GooseChase was kind of like a parallel business that we grew while I was at Canon. And it's just so interesting because I told you guys a story. When I was at Canon, we used to have Power Hour on Wednesdays, and we would dial from 8 to 12, and we had to make 50 phone calls an hour just off of a list. And there was often times where I'd call people and the person on the other line you're asking for is passed away, and the next person you call is passed away. And your job when your manager comes over is like, well, did you get the next decision maker? And that's maybe a little aggressive, right, to say that the managers were that harsh. But I think what has happened in sales, and I saw this a lot when I went to Salesforce as an SDR after Canon, is that people in sales don't understand what it means to knock on doors and to cut your teeth and you're wearing your dad's suit and make $35,000 or $28,000 a year, because tech companies make it such a nice, cozy environment for you to really have every opportunity to be mentored and to succeed. And that's amazing. Don't get me wrong. But there's this almost this like underlying sense of entitlement of, I need to get promoted every year. And not to say that everybody has it, but that's a huge shift in sales that I don't think existed when I started my career. And I'm not sure if that's going to persist in the remote environment, because maybe you don't have that office-based environment where you're breeding that almost locker room type culture. So it's certainly interesting, the shift in sales, even in like a 12-year span.
That is a great perspective, and we're going to dig into that locker room conversation. Love seeing the activity in the chat there. Luiz, I have a question for you. But before I get to that, a big thumbs up to folks who are tossing their comments in the chat, and I already see questions showing up there, so I'm going to dip into those shortly. But Luiz, you've had such a wonderful, varied career, e-commerce, managing sales teams remotely. We're going to spend time talking about authenticity, so would love to anchor on that idea of what's been your true north. What's been that thread throughout?
So my true north, and the founder of Mailshake helped guide me and bring me back to this a long time ago when I asked him to become my mentor from this online community called inbound.org. So Sujin Patel brought it back to helping people, and instead of focusing on making money, instead of focusing on anything else, just focus on helping people. And, to quote Zig Ziglar, you can have everything in life that you want if you just help other people get what they want. So
Nice.
one of the reasons I was a Mailshake customer before I actually joined the team. And then I joined as a CSM because that was my previous role, and then got the opportunity to go out and build a sales team. So for me, it's been the company that I've always wanted to work at in terms of growth, and what better company to work with than helping other businesses grow. So for me, it's been a great blessing to be able to help so many customers grow their businesses.
Nice. And that idea of helping out, I think, is a really nice dovetail. There's a question already in the Q&A that I think, Luiz, I'm going to send your way first. And because you're working remotely with a team that isn't necessarily entirely remote, one question from the audience is, what have been some of the most difficult barriers you've had to overcome or experience as you're working remote? Happy to open it up to the others on the panel, but I want to start with Luiz because of his experience right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been fully remote since pre-pandemic, and we've always hired, onboarded, recruited remote. Most of the team hasn't even, because we scaled so much in the last year, most of the team hasn't even met each other in person because we haven't even had those, get-togethers that we used to do every year. So in terms of like, I guess let's go back to the question.
The obstacles, what have been the biggest challenges?
Yeah, the biggest challenges are you have certain reps that prefer the office environment. And for us, it's not the rep that we're looking for. We're looking for somebody who can be fully autonomous and work remotely rather than, I'm here at a WeWork, but I don't work with any coworker. Nobody sits next to me. Nobody's here motivating me. There's no micromanaging. It's, you very much set your own schedule. So for us, it's been, finding people that have worked remotely in the past. Granted, everybody, in the last year has automatically got that remote work experience. So in a sense, the pandemic made it even easier for us to start recruiting.
Alyshahn, Caitlyn, what about you? Does that match your experiences?
It's an interesting one. We've been remote for a decade, and I think we were lucky early to figure out pretty fast that we're looking for raw talent, like those raw skills that Luiz is alluding to are very key in our interview process. We test extremely heavily, and our interview process is rigorous. There's 4 or 5 steps depending on what role you're applying for, so that we're really covering off our basis. And we've made hiring mistakes. So I don't think that that's necessarily our biggest challenge because we've had years of perfecting it. I think for us, it's as our team grows, the culture of remote work and trying to make sure you're taking into consideration everybody's feelings, taking into consideration the way people like to work, making sure that you understand that humans are inherently social creatures, and trying to figure out like, hey, how do we really bring the team together, but at the same time respect the fact that people work here because it's a remote environment. So, trying to strike that balance of creating a culture that makes people want to stay, but at the same time doesn't isolate them too much, but then at the same time doesn't ask too much of them from your team. So I think that's probably our biggest challenge ongoing.
What about you, Caitlyn? What challenges have you seen? And with your client base as well, because they're using your tools to hire, to onboard. What's that been?
So, my team, we're mostly remote, so we haven't been impacted too much. Mm-hmm. If anything, I just kind of connect with them. Like prior to the pandemic, we'd connect in person a few times a week, but for the most part, it's been remote. What we're actually working on right now, which I can't say too much about it. There will be a press release next week, but we've actually kind of been working more so on the job seeker side of the platform. So giving people an opportunity to create what is essentially a video resume. One thing that's been heavily impacted and where I think, remote can be a little bit damaging is more so when it comes to networking events, right? I have to say most of the jobs I've gotten have been from attending a networking event, simply because you have the opportunity to kind of speak for yourself and introduce yourself to people. So what we're really excited about, I see everything's changing. I want to give people the tools to be able to get out there. So kind of went on a bit of a ramble there, but.
I love the comments about the video resume, kind of helping the job seeker side of things. But let's also kind of flip around, on the hiring side of things. Everyone here's been hiring. Where do you think you've stumbled? Like, what's changed in the hiring process? And when we're hiring remotely, where are we making mistakes? Well, what do we get wrong? And if no one wants to jump in, I'll pick someone.
I mean, I'll start. I could definitely start with that, because I think this is something that's very top of mind for companies that are, here. So, and at the risk of being contentious, I'll just
bonus points for that. Come on,
this is really important to us. So I think we hear a lot of people saying it's really hard right now to find jobs. It's really hard right now to get in front of interviewers, to get an opportunity. But at the same time, then we hear companies that are like, we can't find anybody to hire, and we have so many job openings available. And if you look at LinkedIn or Indeed or Monster or any of these sites, I'm sure HireUp, there's lots of opportunities out there for individuals to go out to get. But I think that there is this almost like disillusionment with the hiring and interviewing process where, hiring managers are frankly pretty frustrated to get interviews that don't answer the job application. And that really turns them off to wanting to review job applications. And I think people feel like they can't get in front of interviewers because they're writing cover letters that aren't granting them job applications. So you have this like weird bashing of heads that nobody can figure out. And the majority of sorry, Caitlyn, you seem to give a point.
No, I just want to respond to that. I completely agree with you. One of the things that kind of frustrates me the most about the hiring process, and this is not just having to do with remote, but just the hiring process in general, is like you put up this job post and then everybody goes and tailors their cover letter to meet that job post requirements. And then at the end of, let's say that person gets hired and 3 months later, they're unhappy, the employer's unhappy. Everybody's unhappy because we kind of pretended to be something we weren't. Where I'm trying to get with HireUp is that if we have this like database of people where they can answer their own questions, tell their stories, and be honest about what they're looking for, I want employers to be able to input like search criteria and what they're looking for and be matched instantly, and kind of show people as they are instead of having people see the job post and then conform to that job post. I don't know if that's a little bit difficult to understand, but I want to get to a point where we can just meet people that have not been impacted by the job post yet. So they're not pretending to be something they're not.
It's interesting because the majority of our hiring comes from referrals or outbound sourced. So we like go and find the people that we're interested in order to reach out to them to see if they're interested in working with us to find candidates. So it's an interesting point. I guess I would wonder, with all the other responsibilities that I have, hiring's not my only responsibility as a startup. How much time commitment is required of me to go and watch these videos? And then, what else am I missing from the video? Because they may not answer the questions that I'm looking for. So I think the idea is good, but I would hesitate just knowing how much time I have to invest in the practice. Anyways.
Well, let's put it this way. Let's say you're in an interview that's going poorly. A lot of people will sit through a 30-minute, 1 hour long interview because they want to be polite, right? I've gone to interviews, I've been on both sides of the table, and you're sitting there and you're like, wow, I don't want to work here, or wow, this is going very badly. With what we're trying to do is we have people answer standard questions. Those questions total about 7 minutes. So if you want to, see a few answers and get to know the person a little bit better, you can. And you can do it on your time. The person doesn't have to schedule anything. And then instead of sitting through, a 15 or 30-minute phone screen, you can spend a couple minutes getting to know someone.
There's
so
a comment.
That's what I'm trying to give people the opportunity to do, similar to like a job fair.
There's almost a comment in there about, sorry, like I'm just like.
No, go ahead.
But yeah, I think there's a comment in there about society more than there is about the job and interviewing process and like societal norms, right? Of like what the expectation is. And it's almost like, why is that the expectation? Like, shouldn't we set the tone as interviewers and interviewees at the start? Like, hey, if this isn't going well, let's just be honest with each other and move on quickly. Standard question thing, I think is a cool idea if it's an integrated piece into like an HR technology, which I'm sure you're gonna do.
I think the problem is that we have prioritized bulk, right? And like volume. So like if you're on Indeed and you post a job post and you get 400 applicants, it's kind of like, okay, cool. I got 400 applicants. I might not even be able to afford 3/4 of these people, but that's not entirely clear. So we're playing this pretend game on both sides where it's like job seekers are too afraid to ask for salary ranges quite often. And employers don't want to put salary ranges out there necessarily because then it kind of, like you don't want to tell someone what the top end of that range is, right? So instead we kind of play this game where like, we're not going to talk about salary. We're going to kind of sidestep that a little bit. I went to an interview once many years ago where I think we'd gotten to like the third interview and I was sitting in their office and we sat down and salary came up and they were paying like half as much as I made. And I couldn't believe it. I was shocked because they had now put in how many hours to bring me in. I'd spent hours trying to be available, skipping work, calling in sick, like all this nonsense. And it's like, it's just madness. It's like this, it's just such a waste of time for both sides. But
Oh man,
At the risk of jumping in, I
sorry.
love the discussion on the hiring, and we're gonna come back to this. But I also want to continue it along that work journey. It's like the hiring. We're talking a lot about job seeking, but once we do find that match, onboarding somebody and being onboarded is really tough as well because sales, especially. I mean, I'd love to see a quick hand from the panelists. Who's seen a sales room where they're like, yeah, we have this, boiler room. You sit beside someone and you listen to their calls, and that's how you get onboarded. Like, we've all seen it. How do we make sure that onboarding is really effective, and both from the company's perspective, but also, from an employee? We've got a lot of people in the audience here who are looking for new roles, going to take on new roles. What can they do to be really successful in a remote work environment, to own their own onboarding? And we had Caitlyn and Alyshahn jumping in for a while there, so I want to bounce it to Luiz. And let's let him take a first stab at that.
Absolutely. So we've onboarded 3 full-time inbound sales reps. We've done it all remotely. Each time it gets better. I'm not going to say that, we don't have this, hey, listen to these demos, because that's very much part of, the learning, but our goal is to get them leading their own demos within a week. And that has happened for every single rep that we've onboarded so far, and having them fully self-sufficient. So they come in and we have our processes in place. They're learning our tech stack. They're setting up their own Mailshake campaigns. They're integrating with Pipedrive, and then they're shadowing other reps, and then they're taking notes and doing the recap emails for the reps. And then they're sending it, they're leaving it in their Pipedrive ready to send on their behalf. The current rep reviews their work and then gives them feedback on their recap email. And then the second week, they're being shadowed by myself or another rep and getting their recaps reviewed. And then by week 2.5, they're onboarded and rolling with, with our coaching culture. They continue improving, and their close rate, like our team close rate, is 40 to 50% demo to close rate. And they're usually by month 3 catching up to that. In the beginning, it's definitely not it's around 10, 15. And then we're working on improving that.
Love that. I heard a lot in there around owning the setup of your own tools, owning the notes. That sounds like a lot of self-sufficiency kind of right out. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, absolutely. And then they're also encouraged to set their own hours and blocks in their day to work the most efficiently they can. And then, they work together to stagger their calendars. That way, the most amount of inbound leads can come in.
So that you touched on something interesting there, setting your own hours. And last week when we were syncing up on this, we all had an interesting conversation about autonomy and how hard that can be in a remote work environment. And in sales, you have to put in the hours. Any advice for the audience on how to manage your own schedule and load to be productive when you're a remote sales rep?
Caitlyn, you want to jump in? Or is this to me?
Well, you're unmuted, Luiz, so go for it if you'd like.
Yeah, so Morgan Ingram has a great calendar setup. If you Google Morgan Ingram and how he does his calendar and color coordinates it based on how money producing activities, follow-up activities, he just has it down to a science. If you're an SDR, trying to really structure your day. For me, it's I'm tuned in at all times, and maybe I'm messaging a rep at 11, but I want to give them that autonomy and say, look, you don't have to answer me right away. Like, feel free to ignore me to do your job as needed. So it's giving them, it's letting them know, like, they don't have to be on all the time. It's just because they're getting, a ping in Slack. So for us, that's, very important in the culture, and, what Alyshahn was talking about, like keeping that culture as they grow, as y'all grow. We're still small and we're figuring that part out. So it's good to be able to listen and learn from what struggles y'all are having too.
Nice. Caitlyn, can you add to that?
I mean, I can tell you a little bit about how I structure my schedule, like my week. Like my sales reps, they kind of, they let me know, like we kind of agree on which hours they're going to be doing dials and whatnot. For myself though, one of the things that I started doing, which I know sounds a little bit silly, is that I kind of structure blocks in my day. So 9 to 12, 12 to 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 9. And then I just kind of assign a task to each of those blocks. And then Monday and Tuesday, I try not to take any external meetings. So I try to work with my team very closely on Monday and Tuesday, and then I try to book all my meetings Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, which prior to the pandemic was super helpful, because when I was going downtown for meetings, I was only running around like a crazy person on one of the days, right? Or two of the days, right? So hopping from meeting to meeting. But yeah, I don't know, like I'm pretty flexible. And I also think that like, sometimes it depends on your energy, right? Like some people are just more energized in the afternoon. Some people are better in the mornings. I'm pretty flexible with my team. We talk about, how they're feeling when they feel the most productive, and I try to work with them and, try to get the most out of them and make sure they feel all right.
What I heard in a lot of that is, and not that this is a bad thing, but a lot of comments about, blocking some time, reserving some time, kind of a lot of controlling. One of the challenges I see in remote selling and remote sales work is a good safe space to do the work. Like right now, we all have a beautiful WeWork space, nice kind of office space, decent lighting and internet connection. That means we have a certain physical location. We've got an environment where we maybe don't have our kids running in, or like parents or family members, or facilities. How, as you think about your teams, how do you support your teams, knowing that the remote work, makes it challenging, depending entirely on their means, their environment, their situation. Alyshahn, I remember you had some fun comments on how you support your team and their work-life environment. Yeah, anything you could share there?
Absolutely. So first of all, just to Caitlyn and Luiz's comments, I think one thing that I learned recently that I thought was really like eye-opening for me is a lot of people struggle in onboarding because they feel alienated from the culture of the organization. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to get a sense of why that was. And there was this article that really stood out for me, and it was language. Like your company's language is its own bubble. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that people feel alienated because they're not in the circle yet. So I think one of the things that I want to do in my next onboarding is absolutely try to figure out, how do I get people caught up on the language and the words that we use consistently that will allow them to connect with others on the same level who've been there for 5 years or 3 years. So just a comment, because I thought that was super eye-opening, and to your point, Luiz, and getting people demoed ready in a week, I think that is a great way to create that function, because now they're thinking about your company both from a customer perspective and an internal perspective. As for supporting reps, I agree, it's tough, and I have two comments on this. One, we spend the money, so we give every rep a first aid tech fund of $500, and then we also give everybody depending on your role, so sales is $1,500 and engineers are $2,000 every 3 years to upgrade or replace your hardware. Plus we have professional development funds and personal development funds, and our goal with this is to allow people to understand that we know it's expensive to get set up. If this is your first remote job, we get it. Everybody's had to do it. We're not going to send you a laptop because that doesn't make sense. Where would you send it back in a remote company environment? There's no office. So, use a tech you want to use. All of our systems like Asana, Slack, and Salesforce are cloud-based. So you can be comfortable in your technology, and we find that's important. One of our customers, TD Bank, did this really cool thing where they had a GooseChase and asked people to take pictures of the remote work setup. And based on how bad it was, they scheduled ergonomic sessions. And then they actually sent people like mice and desks and chairs. And it was just this like crazy delight moment for employees that they didn't expect from their employer, to show them like, we care about you still, even if it was just something so small. And I was like, well, like, that's so like brilliant to take something that was gamified and then make an impact on people's lives. And that really like resonated with me in terms of how to make your employees loyal and show them, you know, that we care about you as much as you care about the work that you're doing.
That's such a great campaign. I could also imagine it's one of those ones where it's like, you know, I don't know if I really want to win that campaign. You know, it's kind of like that crazy fashion trend question there. I don't know if I want to win this competition.
Yeah, or if you knew it was happening, take a picture of your couch and maybe you get set up.
There you go.
Yeah.
This is good. I know there's some more takes, but I'm also sitting on a bunch of questions from the audience that I want to make sure that I hit. So I'm going to dovetail quickly over that. There's a few questions that have touched on this, but winning in sales is often so much about the team. Who's helping you on the deals? Who are you learning from? How do you keep that energy? How do you foster that team dynamic when everyone's geographically dispersed? How do you do that? Anyone want to take a first stab at that?
Yeah, I can go over Luiz if you want to jump in.
So yeah, thanks, Alyshahn. I'll jump in quickly. Where this is one of my favorite things about Mailshake. We have individual quotas where you can get to your top tier quota, but we have a team goal. So everybody works together to get that team goal. And I recently read this book, Leaders Eat Last and then Multipliers, and both of them talk about like cultures of sharing knowledge instead of hoarding knowledge. And a recent example is one of our newest reps discovered a way to sell more annual deals after somebody signed up for a monthly deal. Casey figured out that if she just emails them and says, hey, why did you sign up for monthly? You should have signed up for annual. You get all these benefits. It increases our annual conversions. And she shared it with the team. She could have kept that for herself, but she was incentivized, not even incentivized. She just wanted to share that knowledge with the team. So it's one of those aha moments, like, yes, like our culture is working.
That's a great one. And that comment about the team quotas, because the incentive compensation structure makes such a difference.
Yeah, take that one step further. I agree completely. I would probably say, just to Joseph's question, that we try selling as a team is less about selling as a team, and it's more about letting customers buy the way customers want to buy. I think that is extremely important and something that a lot of sales teams and to be honest, not to knock sales leaders, but a lot of sales leaders miss that because, we're trying to teach a methodology and trying to jam customers down this funnel of buying, of educating them because it's what works for the company. And I get scale and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, we're in the business of service and we need to serve accordingly. And a lot of people forget that that's what we're doing. So that's one thing that we really stress, not just with our sales team, but with everybody. It's a customer first mentality and then an employee first mentality. So I think of them as 1A, 1A. So we're so excited that we were finally able to implement profit sharing across the entire team this year. And what that does is I think it gives everybody this ownership mentality of thinking about every action they do directly impacts them, not in the immediate future, but in forever future, as long as they're with GooseChase, because they're directly responsible for what they take home. And just the approach that people bring to work is so it's just very unified. And I think that's super important when we talk about like how do we create an environment of selling. And not that everybody in product or design or engineering is selling, it is that they are thinking about the customer experience from the standpoint of how do we make sure that they're so happy that it's not a sales cycle. It's we love you. We want to be on your platform every day because you guys have made this experience so good for us. So a little bit of a shift in the question.
Caitlyn, what about you? I mean, you're bringing on some massive partners and companies. How do you make sure your team works effectively as a team remotely?
Yeah, so we have a partnership rolling out it's being announced next week, but we're going to essentially, this is essentially going to give us access to about 1.2 million job seekers. So we're super excited about that. So the way we've been working remotely is like just I'm pretty organized by nature, in the sense that like I take some time every month to organize my Google Drive and my folders and making sure all the resources are kind of in the right place. So I think the best way to kind of keep your team focused and on track is to make sure they have access to all the resources they need. I've worked with a lot of tech companies, and I have to say that things change every single day. And one of the hardest parts of working in tech is that, like, let's say you make a document for a client and then there's a product update like 3 months later. You have to be mindful of all of these documents that are circulating and making sure everything's staying up to date, and also making sure your team has the right information at all times. So that's kind of helped us a lot, just kind of trying to stay as organized as possible, doing the same for the clients. So some of our like partners, we like make a very customized onboarding for them as well. So they're not constantly looking through folders, looking for files. And then we have like a WhatsApp group chat, so like that always is helpful too. We chit chat, we share articles, we talk about things too. So I think that has brought us closer as well. So I think, yeah, the key to remote work is just staying organized and keeping in touch.
So there's some great comments there about like WhatsApp, documentation. That's all great for scaling a business, but also scaling remote team members. I saw a lot of heads nodding. Even in the chat, there were some great comments there about using Notion and some great resources. So folks, make sure you check out some of those links. But let's move a little bit. Documentation is great, but that's a digital thing, and we're all pretty used to that. There's a lot that happens in a sales function that doesn't necessarily immediately translate to remote work. And there's a lot of folks who have had sales roles where there's been in-person sales, or the team is on a sales floor or in a sales room. And if someone's used to that in-person selling motion, an employee or a manager, one of the big things that is in person is coaching. So thinking specifically from that manager's perspective, what do you do to make sure your managers or yourselves are doing really high quality coaching in a remote environment? How does that happen? No
I'll
one's
jump
coming
in.
up. Oh, okay, Luiz, thank you for saving me on that one. I was going to volunteer someone, but you're up first.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, it's been huge. The coaching culture, enabling the coaching culture. And, we've demoed with all the top softwares, Gong, Chorus, there's Refract, there's Dialpad, so many intelligent systems. But until you can develop the coaching culture in the organization, like no tech is really going to save you. And from the very beginning, we would hire different sales coaches to come in and answer questions for our reps. So it's not only me, it's somebody that's, dedicated their life to helping coach and develop reps. So, Morgan Ingram was one of our first coaches, and that worked out really well. Right now we're using Mark, and what they, and they'll review calls, they'll review rep talk time, they'll pick specific things for reps to work with. But what's really been a game changer is getting our reps to do peer review and removing myself from the equation and just letting them decompress and listen to each other and get ideas from each other. So now, that's scheduled and outlined, and we have one of our senior reps going and leading that part of the coaching. So developing that culture and encouraging them to coach each other has been, in a sense, easier than just listening to somebody, because it's a little more structured. So like you're not sitting next to them just getting ideas once in a while. You're coming into it with, hey, this is what I want to work on and this is what I want to learn.
Just to get really specific on that, from that idea, like, hey, let's get our reps coaching each other, or build a coaching mentality. Is it you're telling people to go listen to 2 Gong calls? You're telling them to invite others to a Zoom meeting? Like, at an execution level, what does that actually look like?
Yeah. So execution wise, we have, it's weekly, like role playing session, and then a weekly 1 hour long session where they review each other's. We don't even have any tech, like we use Zoom. So we record our Zooms. We don't have Gong, we don't have Chorus yet. We're, at our size, we're too small, and we've just finally developed this coaching culture. So we're not even using any of the fancy things. You can simply just record your call like we're recording this webinar, and then have your reps go and listen to it. Yeah, but weekly role plays, they pick something to role play, whether it's, upselling annuals or working on their upfront contract or, particular part of the demo. And then weekly call reviews, maybe they listen to 2, maybe 3 calls from each other. So we have 3 reps. They'll pick a call that they want to listen to, and then monthly call coaching with an outside sales coach. And the more coaching, the better. Maybe in a month we'll have another subject that we add.
Love it. That's a great one. Caitlyn, I saw you go off mute. What have you got to add?
I actually think that I think remote is great for sales, in the sense that like I've had so many sales jobs in the past, and one of the hardest problems was that everyone sat so close to each other, right? So it didn't matter that you had whatever headset you had. It didn't matter if you kind of like went off and found somewhere to sit. It was just impossible to kind of find a quiet space. So I'm sure if you've ever worked, I've worked in call centers, like back when I was in university, and like the tech companies have this issue, and it's sales is almost like it's kind of nice to be at home in a quiet space for those of us that have a quiet space. So I'm surprised that, I don't know, I feel like you lose the morale part of it, that component of celebrating as a team, but you do gain a lot of quiet time.
I'm going to come back to the celebration one, because that's an important one. Sorry, Alyshahn, didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just going to say, what an interesting perspective, because I loved the open floor concept when I was selling, because you just get this chance to it almost feels like other people's talk tracks are seeping in through your skin, and you're just like, you find yourself mimicking something that you heard somebody do, and you don't even realize that it was that good. But then there's this, like, I agree, people have different personalities where they feel like they're great salespeople, but they're not comfortable enough to let other people hear, or, maybe they prefer quiet, or they feel like they're disturbing their customers. So it's an interesting dichotomy, and I think it speaks to the availability of sales as a job for all different personalities. In terms of coaching, Luiz, like, that's awesome that you're kind of still managing to get that peer-to-peer feedback on calls. I think for us, what's really different is that, having been in so many different sales cultures and having gone through so many methodologies, whether it's Sandler or Challenger or Spin, or, if you look at like Oren Klaff or Grant Cardone or whatever, like all of these sales, Gary Vee, all of these sales gurus, one of the things that people don't touch on a lot in those books is that the reason that you make friends or you have relationships is because you have a unique aspect to you. And it doesn't make any sense to me as a sales leader to try to create robotic pictures of one another. So from a coaching perspective, what we do is we try to focus on different techniques and methodologies that we want to learn. And then we try to encourage people to take those and figure out what their take on it is, and then test it on calls, and let customers know, and just be like, hey, like, I'm learning this new methodology and I thought it would be super cool to try it out. And that type of like vulnerable transparency is like, hey, I'm not selling you, I'm just telling you, like, it's weird. I get it. Like, it's a little controversial, and a lot of people don't.
I love that. No, that's amazing. I love that so much. We've been called out for doing our upfront contracts. Like, oh yeah, you're Sandler trained. It's like, we're not, but we've learned this. Yeah. But that's so cool that like, hey, I'm gonna test this on you.
Yeah, and at the end of the calls, you ask, okay, did you like that approach to this call, or and see what happens with customers. Sometimes it goes really well. Sometimes people say they don't like it, and that's great for us, because we get on a call as a team and we just talk it through. Because when you're super busy, like most sales teams are, it's hard to peer-to-peer coach, or like peers feel like it could be selling. So, we try to take that into consideration, even though it's so important and we're trying to encourage it. I think it can be difficult to encourage somebody, like, to take the time away from selling almost.
These are great. And I took a bunch of notes here on ways that we could do more and better coaching. And I want to come back to a couple of things that were mentioned there. But I don't want to focus just on the positives. You've all had performance conversations, let people go. So I'd love you to kind of reflect for a moment and think about, you've probably each worked with a rep in this company or a previous one that just hasn't felt coachable? Maybe they've had mannerisms or techniques that just made that really tough. So I'm looking for what you would learn from that relationship, because we've got a bunch of people on this call who are on YouTube who are looking to succeed as remote sales reps. What can they do to avoid those mistakes and be very coachable if they're remote and they're never meeting you in person? What advice do you have for them to be coachable?
This is super topical for me because I just had a situation where I had a really amazing interview process, and we had to let the rep go within 60 days, but I think we knew it wasn't going to work within the first probably 15, but we really, I think we held on too long. That was a mistake. A couple things that really stood out when we reflected as a team. One was it's on you as a manager and a leader to consistently set and reset expectations. Just because you think you've done that and you have your Asana tasks set and you have your 30, 60, 90 and you've done these processes, doesn't mean that there is a mutual understanding of what the expectation is. That was a huge learning for me, and I think that we failed the rep in doing that because those weren't set. On the rep side, I think it's really, really important to listen to the direction and the question that's being asked and not infer what you think the question is. And if you don't understand, clarify, because there was a lot of lost in translation stuff that happened where I felt I was being extremely explicit, or, some of my team members felt like they were being explicit with their coaching and direction. And what we got back was like vastly different. We're like, where did we miss? So those are probably the two biggest takeaways that I would have that would be inherently easy to fail. And they're both obviously oriented around communication and expectation setting.
Oh, that expectation setting, Luiz, I saw you added that link on being successful in your first 90 days in the chat. For those who aren't watching the chat, you might want to check that out. And our team's going to grab all the links that have been shared and stuff it into the description of the YouTube video. So if you missed it or you don't want to have to scroll back up, you can just grab them on YouTube afterwards. Caitlyn, Luiz, anything you'd like to add about being coachable and being successful as a remote rep?
I have kind of a different, let's say, perspective on this. So again, a lot of what we do is kind of based on what my experience has been as a job seeker. So I'm very much on the, employee side of things, even with my own company. So what I try to work towards and what I try to tell my team is listen, I'm not always going to have the right answers. So if you have a solution or a better idea, tell me about it. I don't care which, what your role is. It doesn't even have to be for your department necessarily, but we have a lot of intelligent people here, and sometimes we have fresh eyes, and it's really helpful. So when it comes to being coachable, I just think that we need to give people they have to feel safe enough to be able to talk about the issues that they're encountering, right? Propose solutions if needed. And I think that's kind of really important, because otherwise you're on the other side. If you don't understand why something isn't going well, because I've been on the other side, it's very frustrating. If you're just told no as an employee, you can't do this or whatever, you're going to start to get your back up. So I think it's really important to really take the time to, communicate and then be open-minded on both sides.
Yeah, that's a great point. Management philosophy-wise, if anybody, I think what you said really resonates with radical candor. So if anybody is not familiar or is looking for a really awesome book on communication strategies, that is one I absolutely recommend, by Kim Scott. That's our management philosophy at GooseChase.
I remember getting in trouble once because I had found the solution to this problem that another department had, and it was something that essentially my solution saved them I want to say 40,000 hours of labor. And I got in trouble because I shouldn't have, it wasn't my job to do that, but I did it anyway because it was something that still affected my department indirectly. And I got in trouble for that. And it just annoyed me so much that I tell my team about these stories, and I say, listen, if you have a better idea, go for it. And if I can be better as a CEO and your employer, please tell me about it. I'm open to feedback. So big fan of radical candor.
Radical candor, the feedback. Luiz made some comments earlier, Alyshahn as well. Okay, like this idea, this theme of authenticity, candor, vulnerability. Yeah, this has come up several times and really jumps out to me as the theme of our conversation. But knowing that we've got less than 10 minutes left and we promised everyone to get them out, I want to kind of leap forward a bit. And one of the fun things about being a senior executive is that you have strong opinions. And whether we're right or not, we have strong opinions. So thinking about what's going to come in the next few years, the next 2, 5, 10, everyone's going more and more remote. We all talk about the new norm. What do you think companies and employees are missing that's going to change? What do you think is going to change in this remote work environment that people are just missing? And I am going to pick on Alyshahn first because you've got that 10 years of working remotely as a team. So that gives Caitlyn and Luiz a couple of minutes to think about their answer.
Yeah. This is, I think, a question. I love this question. And it's so like pandemic related, right? Because I think we're seeing this weird, people are really showing their true selves in the pandemic and really learning a lot about themselves because there's nowhere to hide from yourself. I mean, obviously we're all hiding in our own houses, but I think the biggest thing with the pandemic is there's nowhere to hide from yourself and who you are as a person. You're seeing a lot of people, pick up from the city and move to the suburbs, and they're happier than they've ever been because they're now in a place where like, I didn't really like going into the office. And on the flip side, you have some people who are like, holy moly, like open this environment back up for me to have friendship. So to be more direct with your question, where do I think this is going? I think we go to an aggressively hybrid working environment where companies will be forced to give people an opportunity to work in the way they want or risk losing talent. What I also think is really prevalent and something that we've benefited from, so I'm really disappointed about all this remote work, is the access to talent in other locations and the equitability of salary is going to be massive in the coming years. And this is a very strong opinion that I have, because when you go and get talent, we have a developer, in Hungary, and compare that to a developer in San Francisco, and we're talking about very similar skill sets and education, the pay discrepancy is massive. And that's just because of the location of where the opportunity was or is or can be, and the need for those companies to overpay to capture top talent, and as a result require more funding. But now that's no longer necessary in a lot of cases for a lot of roles. And so companies who lean into that and take advantage will access top talent quickly, but will be forced from a culture perspective to figure out how to keep them. And that's going to be a whole new change above and beyond like ping pong tables and office lunches. And, so I think the next few years are going to be super, super cool. And I still think we'll have companies in big buildings like the TD Tower here in Toronto, but split and hot desking. But like I said, the equitability of pay and access to talent is the biggest thing and opportunity for not just employers, but job seekers. I think that's going to be super cool.
Fantastic. Caitlyn, Luiz, either of you want to jump in on your forecasting?
Well, we are talking about the future of sales, huh?
Yeah.
Alyshahn, yeah, great points there. For, it's about what your goals are. And, I've tried to recruit people and bring them into our culture and our environment, talking about how great it is to be bootstrapped and work fully remote. And this is pre-pandemic, and they didn't want it, right? They wanted to go to San Francisco, into the office, have the free lunch, have the camaraderie. And it really depends on what their goals are. And at one point I can see where, working for a VC-backed company, going into the office and, being part of a class and, as we were talking about earlier, like being, inadvertently, like subconsciously taking in some knowledge and being able to apply it to yourself. And I can see that growth like skyrocketing, but I also see like the turnover in that. I talked to somebody who was at a VC company, and he's, been leading their sales for a year, and he's like, it feels like I've been here for 5. Where, I think the burnout is going to be faster. And for us, it's, about building something long-term and sustainable more than just rocket growth. So, it depends on the goal of the people, the goal, so I definitely see a shift, just like some people are going to get vaccinated, some people aren't. It's, there's this divide, but optionality is just going to be huge, and being able to be flexible.
Nice. Caitlyn, what about you?
Oh, I'm so excited to answer this. So the future of work, I think this is a massive opportunity for job seekers because, um, like, I started working on HireUp prior to the pandemic, and I was thinking, this sucks. I don't want to sneak around. I don't want to call in sick. I don't want to have to lie about where I am to be able to make it to this phone interview, this first interview, and all of this. But now everybody is at home, right? So all of these interviews that were already troublesome to do have just gotten significantly easier to do, right? So this is going to sound crazy. I've talked to some job seekers that are employed and actually started working a second job while still at the first, which is terrible.
Oh,
and
my
they
goodness.
did it for a month, and bad idea. And I told them, you really shouldn't be doing this, but it's just now that people are at home, they can do kind of what they want a little bit more. Like, it's easier to do that job hunt, and we're trying to help people do it at scale so their profile can kind of interview on their behalf 24/7. But I think it'll be really interesting because now everyone's at home. Everyone can do phone interviews if they need to. Everyone can seek and look around, and don't get it like, I also have friends who work at a company and literally look for jobs during their workday. Like, it's crazy. So I think right now it's going to be interesting because I think there will be a lot of people hopping around, going from company to company, just because everything being remote has made it that much easier. So I think that employers are going to have to work harder to keep their top talent interested. And I'm really excited for job seekers because I think this gives them the freedom and the flexibility to see what else is out there. So.
This is really good. And I know that we're right up at the top of the hour. So I want to do kind of a quick round on kind of where people can reach you afterwards, especially if you're hiring. You can call it to the audience. But for all three of you, we opened a bit of a can of worms right at the end there about really distributed workforces and compensation and items. So we always send a follow-up email after this. We're going to get your takes on that via email so we can send out to the attendees afterwards. So if you're on the YouTube stream or you're in Zoom and you didn't register, drop your email. You can get their takes on that because we don't have the time to dig into that properly. But I'd love to do kind of quick around. We'll do the same order as intros. Caitlyn, Alyshahn, Luiz, especially if you're hiring. What are you hiring for, and where's your website that people could find out?
Yeah, so everyone is welcome to visit hire-up.io, and we'll make sure that link goes out. I'm going to be doing weekly demos starting May 7th for those of you looking to create a video resume. So that'll happen every week. We might even do it twice a week, depending on what the attendee list looks like. So you can check us out there and just keep your eyes peeled. We have a big press release announcing some very exciting news next week.
That's awesome. Alyshahn, what about you?
I'm looking forward to seeing the press release that Caitlyn comes up with. That's always exciting. We are really looking for senior Android developer. I think that's one of the hardest jobs we've had to hire. I know, I'm talking about the future of remote work sales. And then towards the end of this year, we'll be looking for pretty much all roles. So GooseChase.com is where you can find us. We will be rebranding soon. So what you see is not what you'll get in the future. So don't judge us yet. It's going to be a lot different and a lot of fun. And even if the job's not up there, please reach out. Feel free to send me your resume. Everybody has my LinkedIn in the chat. Always happy to connect. Always happy to chat.
Nice. And Luiz?
Yes. So to tie it back to the very beginning, Caitlyn, my first album was the Spice Girl. So I feel you on that. And you can find our jobs on angel.co. I just posted a link in here. We're hiring for a VP of product management. We just launched Mailshake 2.0. We're hiring a partner marketing manager, and then the specific role I've been hiring for the last 2 weeks, we are hiring a junior AE that is going to help us build our outbound sales process. So super excited for this role. We're looking for somebody that has previous experience selling SaaS and is eager to advance their career.
Oh, that's fantastic. We're right at the top of the hour. I've got a brief point of housekeeping, and then we'll let everybody go. So I'm just going to quickly share the slides on my screen again. And we already covered the house rules. So housekeeping, we've got some awesome upcoming events. If you enjoyed this conversation, you're going to enjoy what else we have coming. We talked a lot earlier about practicing and polishing. We have a cold call blitz coming up. So if you're already in a sales role and you want to get some of that coaching and assistance, you can join us on the 20th of April. Or if you're thinking about getting into sales, it's a great event too as well. We talked a lot about hiring, and I know video resumes are great, and that's one of the creative ways you can bolster your application. We have a workshop coming up with Alex Parks on that. And then if you really want to see some really fun progress, our demo days are open and public, and so you're always welcome to join us. I know I said we get us out, so we're going to cap it off. For our panelists, if you could stick around for a moment, we'll let the folks on YouTube go. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you at the next event.